Good morning, everybody. A lot of what I'm going to tell you today is summarized in a paper which was published back in 2011, for those of you that want more statistics. But before I go and tell you about what we've done to reduce environmental impact, I think it's important to look back on what has happened over the last 60 years. Shark netting was first introduced in Durban in 1952, and the reason for that is because there had been 21 shark attacks in the decade immediately prior to that along the Durban beachfront, and the city council realized at the time that they needed to do something to reaffirm public confidence in safe swimming along their beachfront. And so shark nets were introduced. They had been used off the beaches of Sydney, Australia since 1937. Unfortunately, that public confidence in safe swimming on the south coast was shattered by the period which has become infamously known as Black December of 1957, when there were 4 shark attacks in the peak holiday period on the south coast. 2 of those were fatal. And then in January 1958, there was another fatality, and the accumulative impact of those 5 shark attacks is evident here in the writings of Tim Wallet. So the point I'm trying to make is that shark nets are not just there to protect human life, but they are there to protect the tourist industry of KwaZulu-Natal, which is a major source of income for the province. Shark nets were introduced in the 1960s along the rest of the south coast, mainly as a result of the development of the small boat industry, which enabled small ski boats with outboard motors to take nets out through the surf zone. I need to do a little bit of myth busting now. Many people still believe that the nets are a physical barrier. And because 1/3 of our catches are caught on the inside of the nets, they argue that nets can't work. The nets have never been intended to create a physical barrier, although they do tend to give that psychological reassurance that maybe there is some form of net. Sharks do come inshore, particularly at night, but they are primarily fishing devices. They lower the chances of a dangerous shark coming into contact with a human. Many people believe that the nets have not been particularly successful. If you look here at the graph which we presented here, the red histograms are the solid bars are fatal shark attacks at a beach prior to the installation of nets. The hatched red bars are serious shark attacks. And you can see that there were a number of shark attacks in the 1940s. Most of those were in Durban, and then at the other popular holiday resorts on the south and north coast in the 1950s, and they continued through into the 1960s. And if you have a look, that subsequent to the introduction of nets in the 1960s, that we have had a very, very small number of incidents at protected beaches, but fortunately no fatal attacks at any of our protected beaches. The one red bar in the 90s was at Isipingo. A youngster was fatally attacked by a shark there. This was, I think, the 4th incident in a relatively short space of time, and as a result of that fatality, shark nets were introduced at Isipingo. What is the situation in terms of shark attack with the rest of the country? If we look at global trends, we see that shark attack is on the increase. I think this is logical. More and more people are going into the sea for recreation. The development of wetsuits, surfboards, diving gear has just taken off globally, and so more and more people are using the sea for recreation. There are approximately 6 shark attacks along the South African coast each year. Roughly half of those are in the Eastern Cape, slightly fewer in the Western Cape, but very few in KwaZulu-Natal. And if you look at the population of whites in South Africa, because most of the shark attack victims certainly historically have been whites, we can see that the trend in shark attack in the Eastern and Western Cape has mirrored that of the population growth of whites in this country, but it's not the case in KwaZulu-Natal, and we attribute that largely to the fact that 38 of our most popular swimming beaches are now protected against shark attack. Obviously, we're not going to eliminate shark attack in the province. We have 560 kilometers of coastline, and there are large areas, particularly to the north of Richards Bay, which have no protection against shark attack at all, and that is where we generally find a lot of the most recent shark attacks in the province have occurred. Another huge myth, and that is that the fact that, well, the belief that shark attack was directly related to whaling. Historically, most of the shark attacks in the province were in peak summer, the peak holiday season. We believe it was mainly Zambezi sharks, which do spend a lot of time inshore, and most of the whaling took place in the winter months. So we believe that there's no link between the incidence of shark attack and the whaling, which we do know attracted huge numbers of large sharks close inshore. So there's an overview of the netted area along the KZN coast. We currently have 38 protected beaches. Most of those are to the south of Durban. The only beach to the north of the Tugela is in fact Richards Bay. There are 46 beaches listed there. The reason why there are 46 is because some of those beaches no longer are protected against shark attack. The one which is not included on that list is a very brief experiment. Well, it wasn't an experiment. It was a request for shark nets at Mtunzini, just south of Richards Bay, in 1984. We put shark nets in for 4 weeks and caught nearly 200 sharks, and realized that this was going to be a complete environmental disaster. And we were fortunate, and we were able to convince the local authority at Mtunzini that this was not a good place to be swimming, and it averted a huge catch of sharks. Our original ordinance of 1964 made absolutely no reference to any environmental mitigation measures. We were solely empowered to protect people against shark attack. We were very fortunate that in order to change our name from the Natal Sharks Board to the KwaZulu-Natal Sharks Board, this required a new act of Provincial Parliament of 2008, and this provided us with an opportunity to put in the necessary legislation to enable us to undertake the sort of work we have done to try and reduce catches. So what have we done to try and reduce catches in the nets? A number of different initiatives. One of the first ones was the tag and release of live sharks. Between 10 and 15% of our shark catches found alive. When I joined the Sharks Board in the early 80s, a lot of those sharks were then deliberately killed when they were found alive. But we managed, through the passage of time, to convince our colleagues that here was an opportunity to release these animals, and not only to release the live animals, but also to tag them, which gives us valuable information on movement patterns. The Sardine Run is a major event along the KZN coast. It coincides with the mid-year holidays, and there's obviously there are a lot of people who come down to the coast from up country. The climate is relatively mild, and they obviously want to swim in June and July. And we've had situations in the past where, by keeping the nets in, we've caught huge numbers of sharks, and to a lesser extent common dolphins, because of the sudden arrival of the sardines on our doorstep. And I'm very pleased that through considerable efforts by operations staff, we've been able to monitor the movement of the sardine shoals and to persuade the local authorities of the need to take the nets out well in advance of the arrival of those sardines, and as a result we've been able to greatly reduce the mortality of sharks. Net reduction, a major initiative. We've learned from our interaction with our colleagues in New South Wales and Queensland that they are able to protect their swimming beaches with far less fishing gear, and as a result we introduced a net reduction program in the late 1990s. This coincided with political changes which led to certain beaches having their entire net installations removed, not for environmental reasons but for socio-political reasons. Catches of whales and dolphins are obviously hugely sensitive, and we've been vigorously exploring the use of whale and dolphin alarms to try and alert these animals to the presence of nets. And then another major initiative which we copied from our colleagues in Australia. In Queensland, they use what they term drum lines, essentially baited lines, as a means of fishing for sharks in addition to shark nets. And then very more recently, our efforts to look at electrical shark repellents, which I'll also mention in a little bit more detail. Sardine Run, huge numbers of sharks can follow these shoals of sardines, and I think those statistics indicate quite clearly how successful we have been in reducing the shark catch directly associated with the sardine run. And I think what has also been very pleasing is that the South Coast tourism authorities are trying to promote the sardine run as a spectacle and an event rather than come to the South Coast and swim. This graph tells us a lot about what has happened historically. Catches on the left y-axis, and then effort in terms of length of netting and number of installations on the second y-axis. And if you look at the green line, you will see that initially we only had one installation, that was Durban, and relatively small length of netting. With the wide introduction of shark nets in the 1960s, you see that the red and the orange lines climbed rapidly. They closely mirrored one another. The green line tended to plateau out, whereas the red line did increase. And the reason for that increase is we had a couple of shark attacks at Amanzimtoti in the 70s, and we thought, well, we need more nets, so we threw in more nets at places like Amanzimtoti, hoping that would solve the problem. Those two lines really reached a plateau in the mid-1990s, and then with the reduction, with our net reduction program, which we implemented in the late 90s, you can see that the red line has started to drop. In addition to that, there was also the removal of some of the net installations for socio-political reasons. More recently, in the last 5 years, you can see the red line has dropped further, and that has been a direct result of replacement of some of our shark nets with drum lines on the extreme south coast, the Hibiscus coast, from Hebridean down to Port Edward. If you look at the yellow line, you will see that the catch in the first year in Durban was 552 sharks. And what is interesting is that is roughly our annual catch at 38 installations along the entire KZN coast at the present moment. The widespread fluctuations in the 1980s and 1990s were largely as a result of sardine-related catches. The sardine run is not a very predictable event, and some years we get very few sardines coming inshore, so historically shark catches were low, and in other years we'd have masses of sardines close inshore with the potential of catching huge numbers of sharks. The catch of dolphins and whales is obviously a highly emotive subject, and we've been persevering with these high frequency pingers or alarms for a number of years. Unfortunately, the results are rather disappointing, to say the least, but I guess we have to continue, persevere, and hopefully this might well help us to reduce catches of those two animal groups. This is what a drum line looks like. It's essentially just another way of fishing for sharks. Instead of using a gill net, it's a large, a single baited hook. Many people confuse it with the concept of long lines with huge numbers of hooks. It's just one single hook, which is supported below a very large buoy or drum. And what we've done in terms of our replacement strategy, we've said where we take one 200-meter net out of the water, we will replace it with 4 drum lines. Sorry, I seem to be missing the slide here. The drum lines have only been introduced on the Hibiscus coast, the area from Hebridean southwards. They were introduced in 2007, where we replaced half the nets with drum lines. And as you can see, in terms of our shark catch, the catches prior to the introduction of drum lines were in the region of 200, and with the use of mixed gear nets and drums, we have not achieved a large decrease in the number of sharks caught. But what is interesting is that the species composition has changed. The animals highlighted in blue, there's a significantly lower catch on the drum lines. The species highlighted in red, we've had a significantly higher catch on the drum lines. Dusky sharks, most of those caught are newborns, 5 kilograms, and there has been a commercial fishery for small dusky sharks along the KZN coast for many years, so we're not particularly concerned about that. But what is gratifying for us is that non-threatening species like ragged-toothed sharks, far fewer of them are caught on the drum lines, scalloped hammerheads, spinner sharks, black-tip sharks. The catches on the drum lines have definitely come down. The catches, we catch significantly fewer Zambezi sharks on the drum lines, and that is a cause for concern, because we believe that historically most of the problem species on our coast were Zambezi sharks, and we're a little bit worried at this stage about going from an all-net situation to an all-drumline situation, because we need to convince ourselves that the drum lines are going to provide the sort of protection that we require in terms of catching dusky Zambezi sharks that move into the vicinity of our beaches. But I think where the drum lines have been a huge success is in terms of reduction in catches of what we would call harmless animals or bycatch. And you can see there that we've been able to literally halve our bycatch numbers as a result of the introduction of drum lines. They very rarely catch turtles, dolphins, whales, and rays, and those animals constitute the bulk of our bycatch. So, what is the current situation in the province? Many people believe that we should be expanding. We're a business. The more nets we have, the more money we can generate. It's not a philosophy which we embrace at all. Isipingo was the last new net installation. We would like to replace more nets with drum lines, particularly in the middle south coast and on the north coast, where Richards Bay only has 3 drum lines. None of those other beaches have drum lines at all. We are a little bit concerned because there are plans for development at Blythedale with the Elan estate. There's talk about development on the north bank of the Tugela, and often with those developments comes requests for shark nets. We're currently embroiled in a debate with the environmentalists over the presence of the shark nets in the Allowal MPA, particularly the nets at Park Rennie and at Scottburgh. And I'm pleased that we're on the same page as the environmentalists for once, in that we have proposed to the Amdoni municipality that the nets at Park Rennie can no longer really be justified, and that they could be taken out, which would greatly appease a lot of the environmental criticism, particularly from the diving fraternity, which operates in the Allowal MPA. I think one of the most significant events has been the acceptance of our minister. We fall under the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, that wider consultation should be entered into when making decisions about whether newly created areas are entitled to have shark nets or not. Historically, it was a case of Sharks Board, can you do the job, put the nets in, and create a safe swimming area. Now we realize that we need far wider public consultation. Environmental concerns have to be taken into consideration. Economic and tourism concerns need to be taken into consideration. So it will no longer be the decision of the Sharks Board, but it will be a political decision taken by the province as to whether these newly created areas require nets. We've finally been able to get some money to do electrical shark repellent work, looking at a cable where maybe we can protect beaches with an electric field. The challenge is, of course, the surf zone. We're not sure how successful we're going to be in maintaining electrical cable in the surf. And then just the final slide. It's interesting in that the shark attack issue is not just confined to KZN. There are a number of hotspots that are emerging in different places of the world, and different attitudes prevail in different areas. And in many areas, for example, Port St. John's, the locals are adamant that they want shark nets. The issue is boiling it in Western Australia at the moment. Thank you.